They thought I was done. They thought I'd sit quietly, drooling into my oatmeal, staring blankly out of a window while time ticked me away. But let me tell you something. When you push an old woman into a corner, she doesn't wither. She sharpens. My name is Evelyn May Holloway. I'm 78 years old. I wear my silver hair like a crown. And I've been underestimated every single day of my life. Until I decided that would never happen again. You want the truth? Here it is. I didn't ask for this war. But when your own flesh and blood looks you in the eye, smiles politely, and then signs your freedom away, you either let it happen or you burn the whole damn building down. Let me take you back. My husband, Harold, died 4 years ago. 47 years of marriage and then poof, silence. Just like that. No more Saturday jazz, no more arguing about coffee strength. No more whispering late at night about how proud we were of our daughter Lynn. No more anything. And in that silence, something inside me began to shrink. Slowly. Quietly. Like a flame losing oxygen. Lynn came around more often after he passed. First I thought it was love. A daughter checking in on her mama. But no, it was reconnaissance. She'd bring her husband, Mark, with her sometimes. I always found him as warm as a wet sock. They'd whisper in the kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. She's still leaving the oven on. Did you see the mail stacking up? I wasn't senile. I was grieving. There's a difference. Then came the moment, the one I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday morning in April. The dogwoods were blooming, and the air smelled like springtime second chances. I was in my armchair watching a rerun of Murder, She Wrote, sipping tea when they walked in. Not a hello. Not a, how are you, Mom? Just tight lips and stiff shoulders. Lynn sat across from me, her hands folded neatly, like a bank teller about to deny a loan. Mark stood behind her like a bodyguard. That's when she said it. Mom, we found a place for you. It's time. I blinked. A place. A facility. It's nice. Safe. There's staff and meals and structure. Structure? I'm not a damn Lego set. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the words wrap around me like barbed wire. I realized in that moment they weren't rescuing me. They were disposing of me. 2 days later, I was in a place called Meadow Lakes Retirement Living. It smelled like antiseptic and overcooked carrots. My roommate Mabel snored like a leaf blower. The staff were decent but stretched thin, like butter scraped over too much bread. I didn't belong there. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I lasted exactly 17 days. On day 5 I started planning. On day 10 I got my hands on a tablet. Some sweet young nurse named Carlos let me borrow his. On day 12, I learned the building was privately owned. On day 15 I found the owner's name, Douglas Reeves. On day 16 I found out Douglas was in deep debt after a bad hotel venture in Miami. On day 17 I wrote a check. Now let me explain something. Harold and I weren't rich, but we were smart. He worked insurance. I taught middle school English for 35 years. We lived modestly, invested wisely, and never told Lynn just how much we had tucked away. I had enough to buy that building and have plenty left over to die with dignity. That's the kind of power nobody suspects from a woman who wears orthopedic shoes. The day I walked into the facility's front office with a real estate attorney and a smirk on my face, the receptionist almost dropped her coffee. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked. I slid the paperwork across the desk. "Yes. I believe you now work for me." Cue silence. Douglas showed up the next morning, twitching like a ferret. He wanted to back out of the deal. I told him I'd double his pain if he did. He signed. I became the legal owner of Meadow Lakes Retirement Living on May 2nd. On May 3rd I changed everything. The rooms got painted. The food changed, real spices, actual flavor. I brought in a library, a real one. I hired more staff and paid them better. And Mabel? I gave her her own private suite, just so she could snore in peace. And on May 10th I evicted 2 people. Lynn and Mark. Oh, you thought they didn't move in? Let me backtrack. Turns out, Lynn and Mark had been living rent-free in my house ever since they moved me out. They sold most of my furniture, said it was too old-fashioned, and turned my sunroom into a yoga studio. Mark even started hosting poker nights in Harold's study. I knew from Carlos, God bless that boy, that Lynn had updated my emergency contact to her own cell and cut off my phone line. I couldn't even call the bank without her permission. She planned the whole thing. Legal guardianship, power of attorney, even a plan to liquidate my assets once I was too far gone to care. Too far gone? I was just getting started. Once I owned the building, I made a few calls. One to my lawyer, one to the police, one to a locksmith, and one to a private moving company that specializes in evictions. They arrived at 7:42 a.m. By noon, every last yoga mat, poker chip, and essential oil diffuser was on the curb. Lynn came storming into the facility at 1:15 p.m., red-faced and furious. I met her in the lobby, not as her mother, but as her landlord. "Mom, what the hell is this?" she shouted. I smiled real sweet. "Oh, you didn't get the notice? I'm afraid you've been relocated. Let's pause here. Now I know what you might be thinking. Was it too harsh? Did I go too far? No, because what they took from me was not just a home, they took my voice. My autonomy. They buried me while I was still breathing. So I did what any good teacher would do. I taught them a lesson." Lynn stood in the lobby like someone had slapped her with a cold fish. Her hair was flawless, her nails French-tipped, and her expensive beige coat screamed upper-middle-class dignity. But in that moment, she didn't look powerful. She looked small. "Mom, what are you doing?" she hissed. "You can't just throw us out like that." "Oh, I absolutely can," I said. And I did. Carlos was behind the counter, pretending to reorganize pamphlets but not even trying to hide his grin. A few residents peeked their heads around doorways. Mabel even wheeled up beside me, munching on a Snickers bar like she was front row at the movies. Lynn took a step closer. "This is insane. You've completely lost it." "No, sweetheart," I replied, my voice calm as rain. "I found it. You just never wanted me to remember where I'd put it." Mark came in a few seconds later, carrying what I assume were the last of their things from my house. He looked at me like I was an alien. "You can't seriously think this is legal." I turned to the lawyer standing quietly beside me, a gentleman named Mr. Harlan Witt, 82 years old, sharp as broken glass, and meaner than a junkyard raccoon when needed. "It's ironclad," he said, without even looking up from his folder. Lynn's voice cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing." "No," I said. "You don't understand what you've done." She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "You moved me into a home without even asking. You went through my drawers, my finances, my memories. You tossed me in a box and called it love. I was grieving. I was alone. But I wasn't helpless." "Mom, you looked me in the eye," I said, my voice breaking a little, "and decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore." The lobby was silent. Lynn's eyes welled up. For a second, the daughter I once knew flickered behind that polished exterior. "I was trying to help," she whispered. I softened. Just a bit. "Then why did it feel like betrayal?" No answer. I let the silence hang like a verdict. "Go. Figure out your next step." Just like I had to. That night I sat out on the back patio of Meadow Lakes. My patio now, with Mabel beside me, wrapped in a fuzzy blanket. She didn't say much, just sat there with that knowing smirk. The stars blinked lazily above us, like even they were tired of the day's drama. "You okay, boss lady?" Mabel asked after a while. I sipped my tea. "I will be." And I meant it. Owning the building changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone inside those beige walls. The next morning, I posted a handwritten note in the dining hall. "This is no longer a waiting room for death. This is a place for second beginnings. Evelyn May Holloway, owner and resident." A few people chuckled. Some rolled their eyes. But over the next few weeks, they started to believe it. I brought in a music therapist on Wednesdays. We danced. Yes, actual dancing. I replaced the bingo cards with poetry nights, story circles, and even speed friending. I converted one of the unused conference rooms into a memory garden. Photos of residents in their youth, playing on screens framed on walls. We remembered who we used to be, and then slowly we became more than that again. Carlos was promoted to program director. He cried when I gave him the badge. "No one's ever believed in me like this," he said. "I'm just the first," I replied. He hugged me like I was his mother. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone who had lost a family. I felt like someone who was building one. But don't get me wrong. This story wasn't all sunshine and redemption. Healing's ugly. It's slow. It hurts in weird places. And Lynn didn't disappear. She sent letters. The first few were cold, legal, full of veiled threats. I burned them. Then came one that wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in shaky cursive that reminded me of her third-grade Christmas list. It read, "I don't know who I am without you, Mom. I'm sorry. I panicked. I messed up. You taught me strength, but I used it to control you instead of protecting you. I miss Dad. I miss you. I'm sorry. Love, Lynn." That letter? I didn't burn it. I folded it gently, placed it in Harold's old cigar box, and tucked it beside the photo of the three of us at Disney World. Lynn on his shoulders, me laughing, a lemonade in hand. She wasn't forgiven. Not yet. But maybe one day. A few months passed. Meadow Lakes transformed. The community grew tighter, stronger. Residents started calling it the Holloway House as a joke, but it stuck. One night, we hosted an open mic event. A 91-year-old ex-firefighter named Gus got up and read love poems he'd written for his late wife. Carlos sang Sam Cooke songs. Mabel rapped about losing a bingo jackpot. And then they called me up. I stood there, microphone in hand, looking out at a crowd of gray hair, canes, wheelchairs, and laughter. Alive laughter. I thought my life was over, I told them. Turns out it was just beginning. Applause. Some tears. And deep in the back of the room by the door stood Lynn. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask for anything. She just listened. And for the first time, I didn't see her as the woman who put me in a box. I saw her as the girl who used to sneak cookies from the jar and fall asleep in my lap while I graded papers. Still broken. Still mine. I didn't wave. But I didn't turn away either. I'd taken back my life. But I wasn't done yet. The first time I heard the scratching under the floor, I thought it was just pipes. It was midnight, my favorite time now. The halls of Meadow Lakes were quiet, but not dead. Lights from the community garden danced through my window. Mabel was snoring 2 doors down. And I was sitting with a folder of old maintenance records that Douglas, the former owner, never bothered to organize. I had no reason to suspect anything, until the folder slipped from my hands and scattered papers across the floor. One page, thin, yellowed, torn on the edge, caught my eye. Subbasement access locked. Storage of legacy files. 1982 to 2004. No key on site. Ask Douglas. I didn't even know there was a subbasement. Scratch. There it was again. I froze. My ears were sharper than most. Years of catching middle schoolers whispering during tests taught me to hear through walls. But this, it wasn't rats. It was slow. Rhythmic. Like someone dragging something heavy just below my feet. The next morning, I brought it up casually to Carlos. "Ever heard anything from below?" I asked, pouring sugar into my coffee. He blinked. "Like under the building?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Once. Thought I was losing it. There's an old elevator shaft in the east wing. Boarded up. Never thought much of it." "Why?" "No reason," I said and smiled, which of course meant, "I'm absolutely going down there." That night I found the shaft. Old plywood nailed crooked. Dust thick as ash. The kind of darkness that seems to listen when you breathe. I brought a flashlight. Not a tiny one, a mag light. I wasn't stupid. The boards came off easy. Whoever covered this up wanted it forgotten, not protected. Behind them, a rusted elevator cage. Manual crank. A brass lever worn from use. I was about to pull it and then I stopped. My hand trembled. Not from fear. From knowing something waited. It took 2 days to find someone with the original building plans. An old city clerk named Judith who remembered Meadow Lakes when it was still Elmwood Convalescent Care. Back when it was a state-run facility, back when laws were looser, inspections rarer, and a whole lot of things could go wrong without anyone noticing. Judith slid the blueprints toward me. "That's subbasement," she said, tapping it. "It wasn't for storage. It was where they put the difficult ones." "Difficult?" I asked. She sighed. "The ones who talk too much, wandered, screamed at night. They weren't treated, Evelyn. They were contained." My stomach turned. Not because I was scared. Because I'd been this close to being one of them. If Lynn had signed a different form, if someone had checked the wrong box, I could have spent my final years locked in a dark room, mistaken for mad, silenced, forgotten. I didn't sleep that night. I waited until 3 a.m. and I went back. The elevator groaned as I lowered myself. Dust rained from the beams. The smell hit first, mildew, rot, a sharp chemical stink that made my throat burn. The flashlight cut a narrow path through pitch-black hallways. Old filing cabinets. Broken chairs. Faded restraints still hanging from metal bedposts. This wasn't storage. This was a tomb. I moved slowly. Every step forward felt like stepping through history no one wanted remembered. That's when I found the records room. A single bulb flickered overhead, powered by God knows what. Boxes. Dozens. Hundreds. And inside names. Dates. Diagnosis after diagnosis. Hysteria. Agitation. Chronic disruption. They weren't sick. They were inconvenient. And then I found a photo. Black and white. A woman, probably in her 60s, chained to a bedpost, eyes wide, lips sewn shut with medical tape. The note attached read, "Patient refused to comply. Isolated March 14, 89. Her name was Mildred Halloway. Halloway. My husband's last name. I almost dropped the photo. I ran back up the elevator, breath shaking, heart clawing at my ribs. That name. That photo. That expression. Mildred had been my husband's aunt. I remembered the name from a single story. Harold once told me his family lost her to a mental institution when she was unwell. They didn't lose her. They buried her alive in the very building I now owned. The next morning I brought Carlos down. He didn't want to go. But I insisted. We spent the whole day hauling those records out, scanning them, labeling them, building a case. We contacted a journalist. A real one, Emmy-nominated, works with a nonprofit for elder rights. Her name was Nia, and she showed up in jeans and steel boots and a fire in her voice. When I showed her Mildred's file, she put her hand over mine. "We're going to tell the world," she said. The story broke 2 weeks later. Nursing Home of Horrors, the hidden past beneath Holloway House. It exploded. Local news. Then national. Then the governor's office. Families of the forgotten came forward. Names on dusty papers became real. And for the first time in decades they were seen. I stood on the front steps of Holloway House, press cameras flashing, holding that same photo of Mildred in my hands. "My name is Evelyn May Holloway," I told the crowd. "This is not just a home. It's a battlefield. And we just won the first round." Applause roared. But I didn't smile. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. Later that week, Lynn showed up again. No makeup. No heels. Just a woman with swollen eyes and a grief I recognized in my own mirror. "You knew her?" she asked softly. "Mildred?" "Yes. She was family." "I didn't know." Her voice broke. "I thought I was helping you, Mom. I really did." I looked at her for a long moment. "I know you did," I said. "But help without respect is just control." She nodded. "I want to try again. If you'll let me." I paused. Then opened the door. Just a crack. 6 months passed. The world called me a hero. An icon. A rebel grandmother. They made memes of me wearing sunglasses with the caption, "Put me in a home? Honey, I'll own the whole block." Cute. But none of those people saw what it took. None of them saw the nights I cried in the dark, holding Harold's pillow like it could still speak. The morning I coughed up blood and told no one. Or the afternoon I forgot the name of the street I lived on for 40 years. You see, when you fight this hard, when you push this long, eventually, the clock starts pushing back. It began in the simplest ways. I'd forget the lunch schedule. I'd reach for a sentence and grab silence instead. I'd lose minutes, little blank patches, like moth holes in fabric. Carlos noticed before I did. One day he pulled me aside. His eyes were pink. "You okay, boss?" he asked. I lied. Just tired. But Carlos was never fooled. Not anymore. The tests confirmed it a few weeks later. Early onset vascular dementia. Not fast. Not brutal. But certain. I stared at the diagnosis like it belonged to someone else. But it didn't. It belonged to me. The woman who bought the building. The woman who made the headlines. The woman who still had unfinished business. I called Lynn. She arrived the next day. No demands. No defensiveness. Just her, my daughter, walking slowly toward me like she was afraid I'd vanish. "I'm here," she said. I nodded. "I need your help." Her eyes widened. "You built this place, Mom." "No," I said, reaching for her hand. "We will." Over the next few months, Lynn became everything I never thought she'd be. She quit her job, studied nonprofit law. She sat in on every staff meeting, helped design new resident programs, started a scholarship in Mildred's name for students researching ethical elder care. She didn't try to take control. She learned to listen. And maybe for the first time in her life, she saw me, not just as her mother, but as a person with dreams, rage, purpose, power. I spent my mornings teaching. Not math, not grammar, but fire. I told young nurses and volunteers what it feels like to be silenced, to be called sweetie by someone who hasn't earned it, to have a spoon pushed toward your mouth like you're 3 years old again. I taught them how to see us, really see us. Old doesn't mean useless. Grief doesn't mean gone. Slowness doesn't mean silence. We are still here. And then one morning, I woke up, and it was hard to remember the names of the flowers in the garden I planted myself. Carlos noticed. He said nothing, but his eyes told me the truth. Time was speeding up, and I was running out of road. So I wrote my own goodbye. I sat down, pen in hand, on the porch of Holloway House, the sun warm on my cheeks, wind brushing my silver hair like a prayer, and I wrote letters. To Lynn. To Carlos. To Mabel, who was now running our comedy night on Thursdays. To the residents. To the future. And when I finished, I made one final change to the building. I had a wall in the front lobby painted a soft cream color, warm and glowing, and at the center, framed in wood from the tree Harold planted in our backyard 50 years ago, I placed a plaque. The inscription said, "This home was not built with walls but with will. Evelyn May Holloway, teacher, rebel, mother, founder." Underneath it, I left a brass hook. 4 keys. Because no one would ever again be locked away. A week later, I had a moment. The kind they write poems about. I stood at the edge of the memory garden, sunlight painting everything gold, watching Lynn laugh with Carlos, watching Mabel chase a squirrel with her cane, watching 2 teenagers volunteering in the greenhouse smile like they'd found the secret to life. And for the first time and maybe ever, I felt done. Not empty. Complete. They say I died in my sleep 2 weeks later. That's only half true. Because I didn't really die. I just let go. And in my place, something bigger lived on. The Holloway Foundation for Dignity in Aging became one of the most respected elder advocacy organizations in the country. Carlos testified before Congress about nursing home reform. Lynn published a memoir, Unquiet, My Mother, Her Fight, and the Women We Forget. It hit #1 within a week. Mabel? She toured as a stand-up comedian at 93. And the building? It became more than a home. It became a movement. A reminder that sometimes the most underestimated people carry the most explosive power. And if you try to put a woman like Evelyn May Holloway in a corner, she'll buy the building and write the ending herself.